What's up, Cane Sport, and welcome back to the Inside Canes Recruiting Podcast. I'm Luke Chaney, joined as always by Stephen Wagner. Stephen, man, how have you been enjoying your bye week?
I gotta say, it's been a little slice of paradise. Weather's semi decent. I mean, it's still raining, but we're starting to cool down a little bit. Windows are open. Sitting here on the couch, having some actual free nights where I'm able to, go to a bar, watch a little bit of the MLB playoffs, watch a horrible Liberty versus UTEP football game on a Wednesday night. Life's not that bad, man.
It's been nice, and with Conference USA football back on Wednesdays, what's not there to love. It's been a very successful stretch for the Hurricanes, of course, on the football field, and they, of course, are also the coaching staff is spending this bye week checking out different recruits, especially in the South Florida area. Um, we wanted to talk about first, coming off that FSU week, Miami, of course, coming out to a 28-22 win. FSU hosted a surplus of prospects, many of which Miami is after guys such as four-star wide receiver Jay Nupshaw, four-star running back Braden Tyson, and so many more. Steven, just from conversations you've had coming out of the Miami FSU game, how do you think that performance by the Hurricanes really improved Miami's standing with some of the targets that were in attendance?
Well, it definitely helped quite a bit with 2027 and 2028 prospects. The only 2026 recruit who was in attendance at the FSU game that Miami is actively, aggressively pursuing, I'm not even sure if I would totally say aggressively, but the only recruit that was there that Miami is continuing to maintain communication with and continue to make an effort for is four-star wide receiver Jason Lopez out of Chaminade Madonna. We were not able to get in contact with him after the game, but he continues to be one of those FSU commits that Miami continues to show interest in. But a lot of the talent was in 2027. Jaden Upshaw, who you just mentioned, he's going to be one of Miami's top targets in that class. He's the younger brother, or excuse me, not younger brother, younger cousin of Miami four-star receiver, or of Miami four-star freshman receiver, and the 2025 four-star signee Dalen Upshaw. So there's a little bit of a family connection there. He's continued to be impressed by the Hurricanes every single time that he's had the opportunity to get to campus, or Coach Beard's had the opportunity to get up to his school. I really like Miami's position for him early, and quite frankly, I think Miami going on the road and doing what they did at FSU really helped their chances for him, even though he was obviously at FSU as a Florida State recruit. Caden Henderson, that's another guy, top. I believe he's the number 2 linebacker in the 2027 cycle. He will certainly be a 5-star candidate. It seemed like Miami is continuing to impress him as well, even though he did grow up a Florida State football fan. I definitely think that Miami is in a good spot with him moving forward. Another guy, Tyson Robinson, 4-star running back from the state of Georgia. Miami is going to very heavily pursue him in the 2027 cycle. He's exactly the type of back that Matt Merritt has really shown a lot of interest in. Some of you guys might remember last year, even though Miami only ended up signing Gerard Pringle at the end of the day, they were involved with Byron Lewis, the running back out of American Heritage, kind of a bigger, smoother running back. They were involved with Byron for quite a while until the Hurricanes ultimately decided to go in a different direction in the fall. And then this year, they started off, there was a little bit of interest in Amari Latimer. Hurricanes have already taken Javian Mallory. We saw Miami go after a bunch of, these kind of bigger, like Mark Fletcher type backs almost, that you would certainly think are, kind of these well-rounded runners. I know Derek Cooper's a little bit of a home run hitter, but Matt Merritt really does favor, these bigger, smoother, complete running backs. And I think that's exactly what Tyson Robinson is. Hurricanes are definitely doing a good job with him, too. We're going to continue to monitor Tyson very closely as well. But all in all, any time that you can impress recruits on the field, I definitely think it's a plus. Any time that you can do it in someone else's stadium, I think that's an even bigger plus.
Absolutely. And just to name a couple of 28 recruits that were there as well, Asher Giotto, Amir Sears, who are both top 20 players in that 28 class, going to be high priority prospects for the Hurricanes in a couple of cycles. And to transition now, as Miami reaches their midpoint of the season, simultaneously, it's also the midpoint of the season for most of these high school football programs, meaning it's the midpoint for a lot of these Miami commits. So Stephen and I have been talking to a lot of these high school coaches of these Hurricanes commits, just kind of feeling out how this season has gone. I actually just got off the phone with Tyran Evans' head coach at Hugh High School in North Carolina. I think I'm mispronouncing that. They're off to a 6-0 start. And he mentioned to me that Evans, even though his stats aren't as dazzling as they were last year, it's kind of a different offensive approach that they're taking this year. Their quarterback's a lot more athletic. They're more of a run-heavy team, and Evans has, kind of embraced that and worked on some of the areas of his game that weren't as strong a season ago, such as his run blocking, his leadership, taking on the responsibility oftentimes because he is a very well-known name in the North Carolina area of taking on 2, 3 defenders at a time and being that primary focus of an offense. And he's just doing a lot of little things to set him up really successfully, or set him up for success rather, at the collegiate level when he does become a Miami Hurricane. And Steven, I wanted to really ask you about, you spoke to Jackson Cantwell's head coach recently, and I thought the article you wrote about just what he's been up to this season was very interesting.
Yeah, so something that Jackson Cantwell's coach told me is or something that he told me that Nixer has really leaned on a lot with Jackson Cantwell is this idea of invariant strategy, which he said is basically whenever everyone in the stadium knows exactly what is going to happen, exactly where the football is going, and you cannot stop it. And when you have a guy like Jackson Cantwell, obviously, he's expected to play left tackle in college, but I mean, it's no secret. He's literally the best player in America. He is going to be the best football player on the field every single time they steps on the field. And so, a lot of the time, whenever you have, an elite running back or an elite receiver or an elite quarterback or an elite skill position player, it really can be as simple as, hey, just get this guy the ball and he'll find ways to make something happen. Well, with Nixa, that's not exactly the case because their best player is an offensive lineman. So what do instead? They move Jackson around the offensive line. They'll put him at left tackle. They'll put him at right tackle. They'll put him at tight end. They do not care at all where they line Jackson up or if the defense understands where Jackson is going to be lined up. They are going to run the football behind him, and that's it. And they are totally okay with tipping their hand and saying, this is exactly what we intend to do on this play, because whenever you have a player like that, it's pretty freaking hard to stop. And I mean, you look at the similarities between that and what Miami wants to do. Miami basically wants to do the same thing. Miami's whole goal whenever Mario Cristobal arrived was to eventually build an offensive line that is so good that it does not matter if the defense knows they can run the football or not. Miami's going to run the football whenever the heck they feel like it. And I think that this commonality of strategies, I think it's going to make Jackson's transition pretty freaking easy once he actually arrives at Miami. It's something that Jackson can get behind. It's something that Miami staff can get behind. And it's exactly the kind of players that Miami wants to bring in, the type of high school players that understand, hey, I'm a great offensive lineman, and anytime that we are on the field, I'm going to be involved in the running game, and we're going to pretty much tip our hand to what's going to happen on this play. We know that the ball is being run behind me, but you're not going to be able to stop it anyway. I think that's really consistent with kind of the mentality that Miami wants to build on its offensive line, and certainly what Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal want to do in the run game and along the O-line. And man, I think that Jackson really is going to have an awesome career at Miami.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, we've seen so far Miami play a lot more out of the eye, throwing a lot of those power formations, even playing the flex a bit. Just these obvious, like, hey, we are going to run the ball type sets, and they just have the ability now, and they're continuing to develop the ability to just run the ball and kind of show what they're doing before they even go to it, and still have that level of success. Just to expand a little bit on Jackson, just because I feel like we haven't talked a bunch about him since he committed to the Hurricanes back in May. Just from what he brings from a physicality perspective, just what he brings in the field, what about his game and what about his abilities suggests to you, not necessarily asking you to project here, but what necessarily suggests to you that he could, contribute to the offensive line at Miami day one early on, such as, a Francis Mauigoa did when he was a true freshman?
It's a truly elite combination of length, strength, size, and foot speed. I mean, you look at Jackson, he doesn't really have a weakness. I mean, the only thing that I guess you could sort of knock him for a little bit is that we haven't seen a ton of him in pass protection, but that's not necessarily his fault. I mean, Nixa is a running team. They're a running offense. At their heart, they really want to run the football. So Jackson just hasn't had, an awesome number of opportunities to, really set up in pass protection outside of some of these camps that he's attended in the past. But I mean, it's like this kid was built in a lab for what you want an offensive lineman to look like. I mean, I think he's listed at like 6'7.5". He's 315 pounds. He can do shoot. I'm pretty sure I saw him do like 20 reps of 225 pounds. Incredibly strong, tremendous length, awesome build. I don't think enough people really appreciate or understand how fast he is either, just because, he's such a large kid. But whenever you look at his foot speed, whenever you look at him in agility type settings, he's got really good footwork too. He's definitely, a faster, more athletic kid than you typically think of offensive linemen. I really do think that, this is as close to a lock of an offensive line prospect as you could possibly have. If Jackson Cantwell isn't an awesome player at Miami and doesn't eventually end up being a first-round draft pick, barring injury, of course, because you always understand stuff like that can happen. I mean, I will totally reevaluate the way that I view offensive linemen, because clearly that means that I will have done something wrong, or I'm looking at the wrong things whenever I look at these players. But I really, really do think that Jackson Cantwell is going to have almost an identical to Francis Mauigoa type of career.
I mean, that would just be huge for Miami, especially with, Mauigoa more likely than not, heading to the NFL after the season and just opening up a very large vacancy on the offensive line. To have a guy like Cantwell who can just step in potentially right away would be massive indeed. Now, another thing that you've been working on, that we've been working on over this past bye week, is the mock class 3.0. And guys, there are some marquee names included in this mock class, especially on the defensive line. Guys such as Anthony Jones, who of course is committed to Oregon currently. Guys such as Bryce Perry Wright, another four-star defensive lineman who right now is committed to Texas A&M. Excuse me. Yeah, excuse me. I'm curious, especially those two guys, what leads you to project them onto this mock class, and what type of job is Miami doing right now with Jones and with Perry Wright?
I think Miami's done a really good job with Anthony Jones. I don't think that they're talked about as much as they really should be, but Miami's absolutely worked their way into the mix for Anthony Jones. Whenever he arrived at the Notre Dame game, he was a total surprise visitor. None of us expected to see him there. But from everything that we were able to gather, Miami definitely kind of impressed him. Then they were able to get him back to campus for the Florida game, and it sounded like things went really well there too. And I remember talking to a college personnel staffer, and this is years ago. But I kind of asked them, and not at Miami, by the way, different school. But I remember asking them, so whenever, a kid announces, a top 3 or a top 5 or a top 8, and you're not in it, just how do you kind of evaluate that? And they said, well, a lot of times we don't necessarily view that as a bad thing, because that frankly just lets us know where we stand. It lets us know that we have ground to make up. And especially in today's age of recruiting, you can close that gap pretty freaking quickly. And everyone understands that these recruitments are not going to be over until December and until you get to signing day. Well, Miami was left out of Anthony Jones's final three whenever he eventually announced his commitment to Texas A&M. I believe Alabama and Oregon, excuse me, whenever Anthony Jones committed to Oregon, Texas A&M, and Alabama were his other two finalists. Miami. Quite a few of us thought that Miami was going to kind of be in there, be a finalist. I certainly did. Hurricanes ended up not being one, but Miami hasn't faltered at all. They've stayed very aggressive in this recruitment. I think that things really are going pretty well, and there seems to be some optimism in Coral Gables that they are going to have a very, very legitimate chance to bring in Anthony Jones. We know Miami staff absolutely loves him. They think he is going to be a baller of an edge player. I think he'll kind of be one of those stand-up edge guys. Or a kind of a jack outside linebacker type of dude. He's listed as a defensive end / outside linebacker at the college or for his high school. But I definitely think that Miami is going to have a very real chance there. Then Bryce Perry Wright, that's a guy that I think that kind of fell off the map a little bit. Because a couple of months ago, whenever he committed to Texas A&M, there were questions. Is he going to go to A&M? Is he going to go to Clemson? Kind of those two schools. Miami was talked about a little bit less, and then it seemed like we didn't really talk about him for a while. But Miami has absolutely remained very, very heavily involved with Bryce Perry Wright. He was the number one defensive lineman on their board. He continues to be a massive priority. He's Ray Lewis's nephew. I really do think that is going to end up holding some weight whenever he eventually makes his final decision, because as we know, these recruitments are not over until we actually get to signing day. I think this recruitment is still very much I think Miami is still very much in this recruitment. It would not stun me if Miami got him to campus for a game at some point before the year is up. I do not know that will happen for a fact, but it would not stun me at all if one of these days we were able to confirm that he's going to be getting down for a game. Those are definitely two of the bigger names. One name that I left out, Nolan Wilson. So he committed to Alabama. He's continued to be a massive priority for Miami. Jason Taylor is going to be up in Mississippi to watch his game on Friday night. Hurricanes are pushing very, very aggressively for him. I think that his commitment to Alabama might be stronger than some people realize or kind of believe, because I think there's kind of this belief that he's taking a visit to Miami. That must mean he's super open. That must mean the Hurricanes are right there in the mix. I do think Miami is in the mix. I absolutely do. But from everything that I've gathered, he really does feel a loyalty to Alabama since he committed to them. He feels like he's not really 100% sure what a school like Miami needs to do to pull him away from Tuscaloosa. I remember asking him at one point. I said, "So, what would it take for a school like Miami to be able to flip you?" And he said, "I honestly do not know." And they've asked me the same question. I tell them the same thing. I do not know. So Miami's going to keep swinging there. The Hurricanes are definitely going to be in that mix, but I'm probably 70-30 that he ends up actually sticking with the Tide.
And one thing to remember, especially on that defensive line, with guys like Akeem Mesidor and very likely Ruben Bain headed to the NFL, it opens up the pocketbook, or the checkbook rather, for money to be spent at that position. I'm curious, and you can check out the rest of the mock class at canesport.com, of course. Is there any other player that you left off this mock class that you think Miami still has a chance with, still are still vying for a guy that is still worth keeping tabs on, that you did not include in the mock class?
Yeah, the obvious one is going to be Derek Cooper. I did not leave him in the mock class just because I do think that Texas is doing a lot to make sure that he stays locked in with the Longhorns. I've kind of talked about it a little bit before. Texas kind of fumbled running back recruiting a little bit in this cycle. Javian Osborne, they totally whiffed on him. KJ Edwards ended up going to Texas A&M, which definitely aggravated a lot of people in the Longhorn community. So Texas effectively had to go after Derek Cooper because they really needed a running back in this class. Their backs were against the wall, and it was kind of desperation time for them to say, "Man, we gotta go get someone." They decided, "Hey, let's go ahead and go after Derek Cooper. Let's make a very serious run at Derek Cooper." He went down to Austin for an official visit back in September, and Texas really has done everything that it's needed to do so far to make sure that he stays locked in. I'm probably 65-35 that he ends up sticking with Texas. Miami is going to have a chance in that recruitment. Miami's not going to keep swinging until signing day. But man, if I'm going up against Texas's resources, I would definitely feel like I've got a little bit of an uphill battle.
And then lastly, a recent decommit that's worth talking about, Milan Paris out of, or who was committed to Iowa State, bigger bodied, 6'5" receiver, a 4-star that Miami does like. He will be at Hard Rock Stadium, or we expect him to be at Hard Rock Stadium for their game later this month, I believe, against Stanford. Steven, just what do you think about Paris, and why is he a player that Miami is targeting, and how do you like his chances, or how do you like their chances with him coming off that decommitment?
Yeah, that's another player that I definitely think Miami's going to have an opportunity with. Basically, I think he was a good player who was just kind of undervalued early on, and he's shown really encouraging senior tape. Oklahoma is in that one too. So is Oregon. I know he's already taken an official visit to Oklahoma. Kind of my gut instinct is sort of leaning toward the Sooners on this one, in a lot of ways, because Oklahoma has not recruited receiver very well in recent years. I think that they've gone after some of the wrong guys. The receiver room really hasn't been great since Brent Venables showed up. And I really do think that Oklahoma kind of understands that, they need to be a little bit desperate right now. They really, there's a desperate need to go out and find good receivers that they can bring into Norman. And I think that Paris is absolutely going to be one of those guys. Miami is very much in the mix. Kevin Beard went out to his school last month it would be last month now. During Miami's last bye week, Kevin Beard stopped by, checked up on Paris, talked to his high school coach, all that good stuff. We'll see him back down here for the Stanford game, like you mentioned. Miami is going to be in it. To what degree, I'm not totally sure. I don't know where Oregon really fits in this whole thing, but I would definitely keep an eye on the Sooners.
Got it. Well, that's all we have for another episode of Inside Canes Recruiting. If there's anything that we missed that you want to ask us about, head over to the recruiting Storm Center forum on the Cane Sport message board and ask us any question you have. There's also for those Canes basketball recruiting fans out there, putting out a lot of content on that end as well. And for Stephen Wagner, I'm Luke Chaney. See you guys later. Bye.